fully naked people.
This is kind of pornography for kids.
And then we never spoke of it again.
No, there's something wrong with him.
Masturbate.
I want to die because I'm not a virgin.
He's a bit of a dirty guy.
Kids do not have sex.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first episode into the world of the O Collective. We are Diana, Winxie, Simona, and Eden. We will chat about everything female intimate wellness and pleasure related. We were raised in traditional households while growing up with a mix of Western and Eastern influences. To be honest, it got quite confusing at times, let alone the topic of sex. This also inspired us to create the O Collective, where we will normalize female intimate wellness. In the first season of the O Collective podcast, we will share with you how we and other inspiring women out there are just like you, and how we are all navigating to find our sexuality and pleasure through life. Today, we will give you a peek into our experiences growing up exploring our intimate wellness and pleasure. So let's get into it. I'm going to start with a less tabooed icebreaker, and for the listeners to really get to know us, Eden, tell us when you first found out that it feels good to masturbate.
I found out it feels good to masturbate when I was around 10 years old while practicing the piano. I was so bored playing the keyboards, I started fidgeting and realized, oh my God, it feels good down there. And then I was shortly caught by my grandmother, who told me that it was embarrassing and it was shameful. But to be honest, I didn't stop doing it. I just ended up doing it in private.
Did that feel traumatizing? Did you feel shame?
Traumatizing, yes, a little bit. I also felt shamed. Hence, I started hiding to do it. Winxie, what about you?
I was 12 years old, and one night somehow I decided to hump my pillow, and humping my pillow felt good. So I decided to continue doing that. So I can't really remember why I started doing that, but yeah, I think I was 12 or 13 when I started. So Simona, what about you?
You guys, I just discovered that I was super young compared to the two of you guys. I can remember that my parents had a Chinese restaurant, and I think a lot of immigrant kids had this. I would stay upstairs in the restaurant alone by myself, but I think I was maybe 6, 7, 8 years old max. And I was just really bored, and I just started fidgeting around there as well. And then my mom came up, and then she caught me and she shaped me into being a bad kid, and that you can't do this and it's really bad for you. But I can just remember that I was very young. And then afterwards, I think I just also did it in secrecy again, because my mom shaped me into being, it's not a good thing to do, and you're not supposed to do this. Don't ever touch it down there. You, Diana?
I was probably a little bit later in life that I realized what it really meant, but definitely like in my own room type of situation, and it just felt so good. But then I felt like I knew I wasn't doing something that was appropriate, so I just kind of kept it under wraps for many years.
Oh, so you were a late bloomer.
Oh, so you were a late
yeah
bloomer. But it seems that we were all shamed into masturbating or touching ourselves. I think that's the common denominator for us all, that none of our parents thought it was a good thing, or that it was something that you do as a kid to explore yourself. Everybody of us was shamed into, this is a bad thing to do, or you felt ashamed. Maybe it's also good to let everybody know why we started the O Collective.
So Simona, Winxie, Eden, and I were friends at first sight, as we all come from very similar upbringings, being third culture kids. We used to meet after work on Wednesday nights for dinner and drink, and we actually called it hump day dinner. It kind of seemed super fitting because we were talking about sex, having no sex, having lots of sex, having terrible sex, and figuring out how to spice things up. When we were brought this up to a broader group of our friends, they often felt really shy and wondered, like, why are you girls talking about this? This is too much. And we shouldn't talk about it, or it's super embarrassing. But it's very weird, because why shouldn't we talk about it? We are our closest friends, and we should be able to share all of our troubles and tribulations with each other to help each other out. That's really what sisterhood is about.
Yeah, totally. It was also there and then we decided to do more research. The more we researched, the more we realized how untapped this market was for women by women. And no wonder this topic still feels like such a taboo because the society and culture tells us it is. So we decided we have to take the opportunity and be the women who are unafraid to show her sexuality and educate more people out there that it is okay to talk about sex and intimate wellness.
And so we're a year on now with the O Collective. What we've done is we started a online community and platform where women can come to talk about female intimate wellness. Here we give each other advice. There's no shame in that community. So everyone is very open to share about all the issues they're facing. What we also do is we do offline workshops where we educate women about female intimate wellness. And the most exciting part about the O Collective is we have an entire range of product lines of vibrators, and we're soon also looking into expanding into new product categories at the O Collective. Now that everyone knows a bit about us and about the O Collective, we want to talk a bit more about some fun stuff. So girls, when was the first time that you learned about sex while growing up with our very traditional parents that actually never really wanted to talk about sex?
For me, it was through my friends, actually, through also my girlfriends, even when it was like about menstruation or using tampons or things like that. I grew up with like a single parent family. So, and I was with my dad. So it really wasn't a point of conversation for us until probably in my late teens when he realized like I was meeting up with guys and things like that. And it was a very awkward conversation. So when I was younger, probably like in my early teens, definitely just through girlfriends. And I think that also makes it not great because we are kind of learning from sharing with each other, but all of our information is not really consistent. What we learn is like from what we hear from other people. And so there was a really big misinterpretation of when you should be having sex and how you should do it or who you should do it with, or if you do it with this person then you're slutty and things like that. And I think that actually created more pressure for my girlfriends and I growing up to feeling like we had to do stuff because that's the age you do it at. That was my experience personally. What about you, Simona?
Yeah, I'm listening to the story right now, and I think I feel kind of the same way. From my household, we never really talked about it. Our parents were never intimate, Chinese parents, and they had a restaurant. So I think the single thing they had on their minds was making money and making sure that everybody in the family was taken care of. And intimacy and sexuality was never a thing that was being discussed or shown. So I think also for me, the first time I learned about it is probably through my friends, Western friends. I grew up in the Netherlands, so it's mainly Dutch friends, and they were more open to talk about sexuality. And then if I would visit them at their homes, their parents would also be more open about it, and you would see the parents being more affectionate towards each other. And I think also what I don't know if it's unique, but in the Netherlands we have all these magazines, and the magazines are it's called the Hitguns or the Breakout or like these girly magazines, but they're very open. You see naked people in there. They discuss their sex lives. Like you see totally naked people in those magazines just to show you how people look like. So I think that was probably my first encounter with sex and nakedness and sexuality. And then later on, you go to the sex shops and at school, you're being educated about it. On TV, you see some stuff. Yeah, everything except for in my own household, I would say. What about you, Wings?
It's funny that you mentioned that magazine because that magazine, so I'm also from the Netherlands, same as Simona. And in Holland, there was this magazine back in the days called The Breakout. And The Breakout was this magazine about celebrities and gossip. And in the middle of that magazine, when you open it up, there were two naked people, a guy and a girl. And they picked people from all over Holland that wanted to be interviewed naked. So they would have these editorials with naked people, intimate questions, where they were from, what they were doing. And that's how I learned about sex. I bought that magazine every week and read through it. And I learned about how to masturbate, what types of sex there is. And it was something that my mom always thought, oh, she's reading very normal magazines, until she went through the magazines once, and she's like, why are there naked people in this magazine? What is this kind of pornography for kids? But it was something that was really, really normal in Holland. And at that time, everyone wanted to read that magazine or had that magazine at home. What about you, Eden?
That's awesome. I feel like you guys definitely have way more education or resources than I did. I was quite a nerd growing up. I didn't really have friends that had much experience. I think I learned that it felt good to touch yourself first before I was educated on anything. And definitely not from my parents. My parents didn't even hold hands when we were growing up because they didn't want to give us, they didn't want to teach us bad things. So I would say the first time I really, really learned about sex ed was through school. I remember we were all brought into an a stadium, a gymnasium, and our PE teacher was also our sex ed teacher. And I just remember him saying, kids do not have sex. And he gave away condoms. I know that sounds a little bit cliche, but that's exactly what happened. And after that, I think then more of the experiences came from dating different boyfriends. And I watched porn, and the porn was found in my parents' room. I hope they're not listening to this. But yeah, I found porn in my parents' room. Speaking of finding porn in parents' rooms, did any of you girls?
Never. Nothing.
I did find it. I like, and it was also very, well, I'll tell you this story very shortly. It was very, again, my parents had a Chinese restaurant, blah, blah, blah. We were robbed 3 or 4 times. And then I think the first or second time, they went into my parents' bedroom, and then my dad had porn videos in his night drawer, and they were laid out all over the floor. And then when someone breaks into your home, you cannot move anything, right? Because the police needs to come and check everything. So we just left all the porn there in the room, with the police coming in to check what happened in your house. And my mom and I were just standing there like, yeah, porn. So that's how I discovered that my dad had porn. I also hope that they're not listening.
That is hilarious. Diana, what about you?
I definitely found like my dad's apartment, he had porn when he was living in Taiwan and I was still living abroad. And it wasn't really hidden that much, but I think because he just thought he was like living alone at the time. So he just put it in where all the movies were. And then I was like, what is this? And then I didn't watch it, but I was just like, whoa, okay. I guess he's like a single guy in this moment. This is like fair. It's not weird to, and then I guess at most when my parents were together when I was very young, I think all of us did that. We would like rummage through our parents' closets. Or at least I did, like every single item would look at and stuff and be super curious. And I found my mom had a lot of like lingerie and very sexy stuff. And I was just in my mind thinking, when would she wear this? Like I was too young to understand why anyone would want to wear that because it was practically nothing. So.
Ooh, raunchy. To be honest, like, doesn't it just show that all of our parents, although as traditional as they are, they're just as sexual beings like us, but they just choose to hide it in the bedroom and not sharing it with anyone, and not even us.
Except for
by the way,
we never found anything.
Oh yeah, very honest.
Winsy, did you never rummage through your parents' stuff?
Literally, I went through everything. My parents had nothing. But the funny thing was, every time during summers when I would go back to Shanghai to visit my grandparents, my grandfather had this huge stack of DVDs, all with naked women. And I was not allowed to go through it. And my mom was like, you cannot go through that. That's all your grandfather's dirty DVDs. He's a dirty guy. So that area you cannot look through. My mom was very honest about it. She was like very, she's like, they're dirty. Your grandfather is sometimes a bit of a dirty guy, but those are all his dirty DVDs. So don't go through it. And it was a huge stack in the living room, in the open area where everyone could see it. But my parents, no, I never really saw anything in my parents' room. So sometimes I've even wondered, how was I created in this world? Because they're so vanilla. together.
That's awesome. The story about your grandfather. So what was your first conversation around the topic of sex with your parents like? Simona?
I'm just thinking. My first conversation. The first conversation is probably also like you will only have the conversation with your parents when you really need to. And for me, there was a real need. I was around about 16 or 7, maybe 18 years old actually, and it was my first serious boyfriend. There's also a very shameful story. So I was dating him. I just started dating him, and we already knew each other for a little while. And then I went with my mom and sister to China, and it started to itch down there, or there was something that didn't feel good. And I got really paranoid. It was my first boyfriend, and we just had, our first sexual encounter, and I didn't know what was happening. And normally in the Netherlands, so you go to the doctors, you tell them what's wrong, and then they will help you, and your parents will never know. But I was in China at that moment, and we would be in China for an entire month, and it didn't feel good down there. And then I didn't speak Chinese well enough to go to the hospital by myself. So I had to admit to my mom during the summer there that I had a sexual encounter with a boyfriend or boy. And that was the first time. She was really upset, and she couldn't believe that her daughter was having sex or even had a boyfriend, because she never knew that I had a boyfriend. And it wasn't the best conversation, I think. It was more like her asking me what I was doing, how I met him, who he was, and that I should be safe. But that was already clear by the situation because I was in the hospital. So, yeah. All in all, there wasn't. I didn't have an STD or anything. It was some kind of infection that I had. So I actually, in hindsight, I shouldn't have gone to the hospital. I shouldn't have talked to my mom about it because it wasn't related to my boyfriend back then at all. But I just got really paranoid. That was my first time.
Wow.
Not the best time, but yeah. How about you, Diana?
Mine, I just remember so vividly because it was so awkward. I was in Taiwan, like visiting my dad, and he clearly knew that like a guy he worked for my uncle, and he came from Tainan to Taipei, which is like a train ride away, just to come see me. And I think my uncle told my dad, and then my dad and I were in the metro station in Taipei at like Dunhua Nanlu, which is right in the city. And I just remember we were like standing on the ledge, kind of the edge, and waiting. And he just goes, as you get older, I was 15 by the way. And he was just saying, as you get older, like you're like a pretty girl, guys are gonna like you, they're gonna want to do stuff to you. And I was like, no. And I was like, I know, we don't have to talk about this. And he's like, oh, thank God. Okay, you know everything, right? We're good. I'm like, yeah, I will. Like, he's like, yeah, there's like protection, like please be safe. He's like, I can't stop you from things happening to you, but like just be safe. And I was like, okay, good. And then we never spoke of it again. How about you guys?
My mom would say, you cannot have any sex. You'll be tainted forever, and no one will ever want you if you're tainted. That's like the only conversation we've ever had in our lives. And then we never really talked about it anymore. Like even till now, we don't talk about it. And I'm now in my early 30s. And she never brought up the conversation anymore. But how it was when I was young, it was, you cannot have sex. Girls are supposed to remain a virgin until they get married. And I think it was from a very traditional way of thinking. I assume and I think that my parents were their first for each other, so that's why they thought about it that way. But yeah, she was very, very strict about it. Yeah, no awkward situation, just strict situations. I'm like, okay. What about you, Eden?
I think I was quite similar. Growing up, my parents have always said, do not have sex. Don't even touch boys. Don't have a boyfriend until after college, until you get your first job. That was basically the rule, but obviously like I did not follow any of the rules that they said. I lost my virginity around 18, and around that time, that's when HPV shots became a thing. My uncle owned a clinic, and my mom actually booked an appointment for me. She was like, oh, hey, we're heading to your uncle's clinic. You're getting some shots done today. So as we were waiting for me to get my HPV shot when I was 18, she was like, hey, by the way, and now I know it was a lie. She said, only virgins can have this HPV shot, or else you're gonna get some reactions. My first immediate thought was, oh my God, I'm going to die because I'm not a virgin. And then, so I just like paused there, looked at my mom. And then my mom like looked at me. She like smiled awkwardly and she was like, got you. I knew it. I knew you're not a virgin. But it was also through that experience and encounter that my mom and I are super close now. We talk about almost everything and sex related too. So yeah, I guess like all in all is like just being honest with your parents and with yourself is the best way to go, and also opens up a lot of conversation and dialogue with the parents.
Yeah, I actually also have the feeling or the experience right now, whereas my mom and my dad never talked about anything intimate with me when I was smaller, younger. When I grew older, my mom definitely opened up about intimacy, her own sex life, or going through menopause and everything. I think when you grow up, they feel that you're more on their own level instead of being your kid, and they need to treat you as a kid, and they need to protect you, and you cannot be harmed by the evils of sex. I think later on, especially when I started dating and she started to know my boyfriend, that she realized like, okay, she was probably having sex, and then she started to open up more about it as well.
Yeah, I think like my dad, like, because I never spoke about it with my dad ever again, really. But when we actually started the O Collective, at first he was a little bit worried because he wasn't sure what we were doing. And he felt like, oh no, I just hope she like doesn't get into trouble or like does like some sketchy, shady stuff. But when he really saw what we were sharing and the conversations we were talking about, he called me up again and he just said like, oh, I think what you're doing is so great. Like, this is exactly like what Asia really does need for people. And even last week, he messaged me and he said like, hey, I know you're super busy doing what you're doing, but he's like, maybe you should consider about looking into your master's degree for psychology and like on the topics that you are covering with your company. It's like, leave it to the Asian parent to find a way to ask you to take more education.
Girls, what was the worst experience you ever had sexually? Yeah. I can go first. I was dating a guy, and then we were really into each other, very, very in love. And then the first time we tried to have sex, he couldn't get it up at all. So that was quite it was sad for him, also very sad for me. It was very disappointing. But that was like, not, should I call it the worst experience? I don't know. It was the biggest disappointment. It was a big disappointment. In the end, it worked out well, but it was a bit of a disappointment. The other worst experiences, actually not too bad so far.
This is I've been empowering of you, Wing. See, you're shaming guys into like
who can't get it up.
People can that they can't get it up the first time.
I'm not shaming guys. I'm not shaming guys. It was at that situation, it was the worst situation.
Wings, do you wish you learned more about performance anxiety earlier on when you were at that age? Because what was going on was probably performance anxiety, right?
I guess it's more difficult for guys than for girls, but I was young. He was young. At that time, he didn't know anything about sex. So yeah, maybe, probably. We didn't know what we were doing. Now, if it happens, I don't shame the guys. But at that moment, I was like, what is happening?
Your fault.
Were you thinking like, oh my gosh, am I not cute? Am I not hot? Is there something wrong with me?
No, I thought, oh no, there's something wrong with him.
Yes.
It was really, and now I think about it, I'm like, oh, it's really bad actually that I thought about that. But at that moment, I really thought, oh, there's something wrong with him. And now we'll never be able to get married and have babies because it's broken. But luckily,
it's broken.
But in the beginning, I was like, what's happening? What about you, Simona?
The worst experience was when it comes to sex. I'm now in my mother-in-law's house. I don't want to be too loud, actually. But, I went on holidays, Turkey, with a friend. There were really cute bartenders there. And then I also told my friend, oh my God, it would be my luckiest day if I could go home with this bartender guy. And then actually he asked me out, and then I went home with him, and it was just one big bad experience.
But why was it bad?
It was smelly, and then his sheets were smelly, his towels were smelly, the entire bead was just dirty, and I didn't want to use condom. And I was young, and I was like, oh, I need to get out of here. And then also, my friend didn't have my number. She didn't know where I was going. And I was also like panicking in my head at that moment. It was just like the worst experience in overall.
So this was fun, girls, being able to share our story and hopefully inspire more of others to talk about female intimate wellness in a more lighthearted and positive light. I like to wrap it up now with one last question. Do you feel confident and comfortable with your female intimate wellness now?
I personally think that I am getting there. I wouldn't say that I'm 100%. And I think us creating the O Collective has made me even closer to getting there. I always consider myself pretty open already, and very confident in myself when it comes to that area. But then once we started the O Collective, I felt like I knew nothing. Like there was so much to learn, and there was so much more to learn about yourself and how much more confidence you can gain from owning your own intimate wellness. And that has really helped me. It's like cliche, but like love myself a little bit more. And I think that has made me more comfortable to tell guys what I need or what I hope for, or all my partners. I would sometimes still feel a little shy when I want to tell them what I really want. But more and more, I feel way more comfortable. And yeah, but I still think there's a long way to go. There's never an end to being the most confident and comfortable. I think it's really case by case. Everyone goes through different times in their lives.
Totally. Hey, Sim, what about you?
I would say at this moment, it's still not 100%, but I'm definitely more confident and more open-minded when it comes to intimate wellness than before. And I think at this moment, I'm at my peak up until now, but I know that I'm going to learn more. So continuously developing and optimizing on that field, which is a good thing. What about you, Eden?
I think I feel pretty confident, and also thanks to, of course, having a partner that I can be working on things with. But I do feel like intimate wellness and learning about our bodies, it changes all the time. So for me, it's almost like a lifelong lesson, and you kind of just adapt and go each time and just keep learning and not give up and not strive for that perfection, because there's actually no perfection to our female intimate wellness and our sex life.
So much work to be done still, and female intimate wellness is a lifelong lesson where we continue to learn and adapt as we grow older. If you like this podcast, please give it a like, comment to let us know how we can do better, and share with your sisters that are just like you.
And for this week, we'd like to give you a challenge of taking the mirror to check your vulva out if you haven't.
Bye, everyone, and have a great week.
Bye.
I want a little bit off. Winks is like, let me take off 5 bitches. Winks, we're recording the video so people will see you eating. I'm just saying. I'm gonna edit this out.
The next part.
Oh, sorry.